Chapter 1. Nutty Disco Dave, the Accuser. Nutty Disco Dave's behavior bears an eerie resemblance to Satan's infamous role as the accuser, as referenced in Scripture. Much like Satan, who stands ready to accuse and condemn, Nutty Disco Dave thrives on finding fault in others, even when there's no real basis for his claims. His most infamous accusation is relentlessly labeling someone as the porn king simply because that person owns adult sounding domain names. It's a classic tactic. Just as Satan twists the truth to entrap people, Nutty bends facts and spins accusations, hoping to taint reputations and push his vengeful agenda. The irony here is rich because Nutty knows full well that owning a domain name doesn't equate to running an adult website. Yet his butthurt nature, born from the sting of criticism, particularly about his poorly written book, leads him to seize upon any fragment of information and twist it into an exaggerated accusation. This behavior stems not from a desire to seek justice, but from a burning need to smear those he resents. In Nutty's world, the truth is irrelevant. Just like Satan, Nutty Disco, Dave uses accusations as a weapon, wielding them not to expose wrongdoing, but to exact revenge on those who've crossed him. His fixation on someone's past or perceived faults allows him to feel a sense of power, even when that power is derived from lies. He has mastered the art of exaggeration and half-truths, dragging others into the court of public opinion with accusations that have no foundation in reality. What makes this even more insidious is Nutty's ability to sustain these accusations for years, digging up irrelevant details from the past, creating narratives that feed his need for superiority. His accusations, especially those relating to the porn king, aren't rooted in any substantial truth, but are the products of a delusional and wounded ego. The very act of accusing becomes an obsessive ritual for Nutty, offering him a momentary sense of self-righteousness and satisfaction, even though it's built on shaky ground. To be constantly accused by Nutty Disco, Dave is to be ensnared in his web of bitterness and hatred. His relentless pursuit to bring others down mirrors Satan's ceaseless desire to drag souls into despair. Nutty may not understand the full gravity of his accusations, or perhaps he does and revels in it. Either way, he's made himself the self-appointed judge, jury, and executioner of those who dare to challenge or criticize him. But his judgments, like his accusations, are hollow and serve only to highlight his own failings and insecurity. In the end, Nutty's accusations are more a reflection of his own demons than they are of anyone else's wrongdoing. His need to accuse stems from a deep-seated bitterness and jealousy, driving him to find fault where none exist. Like Satan, Nutty Disco Dave is the ultimate accuser, but his accusations will forever be empty as they are grounded not in truth, but in the darkness of his own mind. Chapter 2. Nutty Disco Dave, the resurrector of past conflicts. Nutty Disco Dave has an extraordinary knack for digging up the past, rummaging through the archives of history to find old, irrelevant videos and past dirt to reignite conflicts long since buried. Much like Satan, who delights in reminding people of their past sins, Nutty thrives on resurrecting old disputes, trying to drag others back into the mire of guilt, shame, and unresolved anger. His obsession with keeping old grievances alive speaks to a deeply troubled, vengeful spirit, one that finds satisfaction not in moving forward, but in holding on to grudges that should have long since been laid to rest. At the heart of Nutty's actions is a refusal to let go. He prowls through the internet, sifting through videos and content that have little or nothing to do with the present, searching for any scrap of material he can weaponize to reopen old wounds. And in true Nutty fashion, these videos are often outdated, irrelevant, or entirely disconnected from the current context. But Nutty doesn't care. His mission isn't about truth or relevance. It's about reigniting the fires of past conflicts, forcing people to relive grievances they've already moved on from. This behavior mirrors Satan's tactic of constantly reminding individuals of their past sins, using those reminders as chains to keep them bound in guilt and shame. While people may have repented, reconciled, or simply moved on, Satan, like Nutty, takes pleasure in dragging them back into the past, rehashing old mistakes and failures to prevent any form of growth or healing. Nutty's frequent references to old videos as archives serve as his way of preserving these moments in amber, forever frozen in time, so he can haul them out whenever he feels the need to stir the pot. What makes Nutty's actions particularly insidious is his awareness that the people involved in these past disputes may have already made peace. Yet, like a puppet master pulling strings, Nutty seeks to undermine that peace by reigniting old quarrels and tensions. His warped sense of satisfaction comes from seeing others squirm under the weight of their pasts, much like Satan derives pleasure from seeing individuals struggle under the burden of their sin. Nutty's behavior is less about resolving anything and more about keeping individuals trapped in cycles of strife. The absurdity of Nutty's crusade against the past lies in its futility. No matter how many old videos he posts, how many times he drags up old dirt, he cannot undo the fact that time has moved on. People have grown, reconciled, or simply forgotten the things Nutty is so desperate to resurrect. His actions reveal a mind stuck in the past, unable to cope with the present and unwilling to look to the future. In his obsession with reopening old wounds, Nutty is effectively keeping himself locked in a personal prison, unable to move beyond the grudges and disputes that once defined him. In this, Nutty mirrors Satan's role as the ultimate accuser, constantly dredging up past wrongs to keep individuals from experiencing true freedom and peace. Satan's strategy is to keep people focused on their mistakes, making them believe they're forever tied to their sin. Likewise, Nutty's relentless focus on past conflicts serves to keep him and others chained to bitterness and resentment. He doesn't just want to remind people of the past, he wants them to relive it again and again, never allowing them the release of closure or the freedom of forgiveness. Nutty Disco Dave's obsession with resurrecting past conflicts reveals more about his own character than it does about the people he targets. His refusal to let go of old wounds and his determination to keep conflicts alive betray a deep-seated bitterness and insecurity. Nutty, like Satan, cannot bear to see peace prevail. He feeds on discord and strife, using the past as a weapon to sow division and resentment. But ultimately, this behavior is self-defeating. Just as Satan's accusations hold no power over those who have found forgiveness and peace, Nutty's attempts to drag others back into the past will only highlight his own inability to move forward. In the end, Nutty will remain trapped in the very cycle of bitterness he tries to inflict on others. Chapter 3. Nutty Disco Dave, the Twister of Truth. Nutty Disco Dave has mastered the art of bending the truth until it no longer resembles reality. Just as Satan is often referred to as the father of all lies, Nutty's relentless manipulation of facts and distortion of situations show that deception is his preferred weapon of choice. His talent for twisting the truth is one of his most potent tools for causing harm, spreading division, and creating conflict among people who might otherwise be at peace. Nutty doesn't just make mistakes with facts, he deliberately twists them to serve his agenda. He can take the most benign situation and warp it into something sinister, all to fuel his desire for revenge or control. His accusations often have a grain of truth buried within them, but that truth is so distorted by the time he's finished with it that it becomes an entirely new narrative. This tactic is both underhanded and cunning because it gives him a sliver of plausible deniability. After all, there's just enough of the original story left in his version for him to claim he's telling the truth. Take, for instance, his bizarre crusade against the so-called porn king. Nutty knows full well the difference between owning adult-sounding domain names and actually operating pornographic websites, but that doesn't stop him from conflating the two in his twisted accusations. He knows his claims are false, but the truth is irrelevant to him. What matters is the effect his lies will have, stirring up trouble, maligning someone's reputation, and satisfying his own sense of superiority. Nutty's ability to reshape facts to fit his bitter narrative is at the core of his toxic behavior. Much like Satan, who twists God's words to deceive and lead people astray, Nutty crafts his own version of events to turn others against each other. His manipulations often have one clear goal: to pit people against one another and watch the chaos unfold. He delights in playing the role of the puppet master, using his lies to set off a chain of misunderstandings and conflicts. In Nutty's twisted world, he's always the hero of his story, with everyone else as the villain. The irony, of course, is that his victims often don't realize they've been manipulated until it's too late, leaving them to pick up the pieces of the damage he's caused. Nutty's twisting of the truth doesn't stop with other people's lives. He applies the same manipulative tactics to his own history and actions, constantly revising his past to cast himself in a favorable light. When faced with criticism, he doesn't engage with the substance of the argument. Instead, he rewrites the narrative to paint himself as the victim of unfair attacks. In Nutty's mind, he's always the righteous crusader, misunderstood and persecuted by those who simply can't handle his brilliance or integrity. This self deception is another hallmark of his Satan, like ability to manipulate the truth, even when it comes to himself. It's this constant revision of reality that makes Nutty so dangerous and in some ways pitiful. He cannot exist in a world where things simply are what they are. He has to reshape and twist every event, every conversation, and every criticism into something that serves his purpose. And in doing so, he creates a toxic environment where trust is impossible. Those around him are constantly second guessing what's real and what's been twisted by Nutty's relentless manipulation. He sows seeds of doubt, making people question their own experiences, memories, and even their relationships. In this, Nutty mirrors Satan's role as the deceiver, constantly undermining truth to create confusion, division, and discord. Just as Satan distorts reality to lead people astray, Nutty uses his twisting of the truth to mislead, manipulate, and maintain control over those unfortunate enough to cross his path. His lies often take root in small truths, which gives them the appearance of credibility. But like any master deceiver, Nutty's narratives are built on shaky foundations, and the cracks inevitably show for those willing to look closely enough. Yet, Nutty's need to twist the truth ultimately stems from insecurity. Like many manipulators, he cannot face the reality that he might be wrong, that he might have failed, or that others might see through his facade. Twisting the truth allows him to construct a world where he's never at fault, where his actions are always justified, and where he remains in control. But in reality, this constant distortion only isolates him further, making him a prisoner of his own lies. Over time, Nutty becomes trapped in the web of deceit. He's spun, losing sight of what's real and what's been fabricated. Much like Satan, who knows he's ultimately defeated but continues his work of deception, Nutty may realize deep down that his manipulations won't stand the test of time. The truth has a way of coming out no matter how many layers of lies are draped over it. But Nutty, consumed by his need for control and revenge, presses on, twisting the truth at every turn, determined to rewrite reality in his image, even as it crumbles around him. Nutty Disco Dave's talent for twisting the truth is not just a tool of manipulation. It's a reflection of his deeply troubled psyche. In his world, facts are malleable and reality is whatever he decides it should be. But like all deceivers, Nutty's lies will eventually catch up with him. And when they do, the truth will shine brighter than ever. Until then, Nutty will continue to weave his tangled web of distortions, all in the futile hope that he can escape the consequences of his own deceit. Chapter 4: Nutty Disco Dave. the divider of people and sower of discord. If there's one thing Nutty Disco Dave seems to excel at, it's stirring up strife and creating division wherever he goes. Much like Satan, whose ultimate goal is to divide people and sow discord, Nutty has an uncanny ability to create conflict, even between people who have long reconciled their differences. His strategy: dig up old irrelevant videos and call them archives, then post them with the sole intent of reigniting past animosities. These actions speak volumes about his desire to keep others embroiled in conflict and hatred long after the rest of the world has moved on. Nutty's behavior is eerily reminiscent of Satan's method of bringing up people's past sins to keep them bound in guilt, shame, and division. But instead of addressing his own issues or moving on from past disputes, Nutty prefers to keep others stuck in a cycle of strife, like a master puppeteer who relishes watching the chaos he's unleashed. It's not enough for him that people have made amends or reached a place of peace. No, Nutty thrives on dragging them back into the muck of their old grievances, all under the guise of archiving important moments from the past. This behavior reflects not only his deep seated bitterness, but also his desire for control over other people's narratives. By posting these archived videos, many of which have nothing to do with him or the individuals he's attacking, Nutty isn't just reliving old conflicts, he's actively attempting to reignite them. His goal is simple: to provoke anger, rekindle resentment, and fuel ongoing feud. It's as if Nutty is stuck in his own personal version of a reality show, constantly needing drama to survive, even if it means manufacturing it himself. What makes this tactic particularly vile is that Nutty doesn't seem to care about the emotional or social toll his actions take on others. Much like Satan, who delights in seeing people tear each other apart, Nutty is content to sit back and watch as the people in his crosshairs, often those who have already made peace, are pulled back into the drama. He plays the role of the instigator with glee, knowing that his manipulations will cause discord. The fact that others may have moved on from their disagreements is irrelevant to him. What matters is keeping the fire of division burning, and it's not just about reigniting old arguments. Nutty's stirring of hatred extends to turning people against one another in new ways. His relentless need to gossip, lie, and spread misinformation serves to sow seeds of doubt and suspicion among friends, colleagues, and even family members. He thrives on seeing others distrust one another, perhaps because his own life is so full of paranoia and bitterness. Nutty can't stand the idea of others being at peace, especially if that peace includes people who have previously criticized or challenged him. His fragile ego won't allow it. To Nutty, everyone is either an enemy or a pawn in his larger game of spreading division. Much like Satan, who seeks to divide humanity against itself, Nutty's divisive tactics are aimed at separating people who would otherwise come together. His actions create an atmosphere of distrust where old wounds are never allowed to heal because Nutty is always there to reopen them. He takes pleasure in watching people question one another's motives, believing that if he can keep everyone at each other's throats, he'll somehow remain in control of the situation. One of the most insidious aspects of Nutty's behavior is that he often presents his actions as being for the greater good or for the sake of truth. By labeling his videos as archives, he gives the impression that he's simply preserving history when, in reality, he's trying to reshape it for his own purposes. It's a classic example of deception, where Nutty disguises his true intentions, stirring up division and hatred behind a facade of responsibility and righteousness. It's a transparent ploy, but one that still manages to ensnare those who aren't wise to his games. But like Satan, Nutty's efforts to divide people will ultimately backfire. The truth is that people can see through his manipulations and recognize his attempts to drive wedges between them. His tactics may work for a time, But eventually, people catch on, and Nutty finds himself increasingly isolated. The very division he tries to create among others ends up leaving him alone, bitter and powerless. In the end, Nutty Disco Dave's relentless stirring of division and hatred is a reflection of his own inner turmoil, just as Satan's divisive actions are rooted in his rebellion against truth and peace. Nutty's behavior stems from his inability to confront his own failures and insecurities. By spreading conflict and hatred, Nutty distracts himself from the reality of his own shortcomings. But like all agents of division, he will one day be undone by the very chaos he seeks to create. Until then, Nutty will continue his Satan like mission of keeping others divided, all while he remains a prisoner of his own bitterness and hatred. Chapter 5. Nutty Disco Dave, the master of temptation and conflict. Nutty Disco Dave has a unique talent for pulling others into unnecessary arguments and stirring the pot just to see what boils over, whether it's hurling baseless accusations or goading others into defending themselves. Nutty seems to take delight in the chaos he creates. His methods bear a striking resemblance to Satan, often referred to as the Great Tempter. Just as Satan seeks to lead people into sin and strife, Nutty's actions provoke others into conflicts that serve no purpose other than feeding his desire for drama and attention. At the heart of Nutty's strategy is his love for instigating. He doesn't just sit back and observe. He actively participates in and encourages confrontations, hoping to drag others down to his level of pettiness. Nutty thrives on the defensive reactions he gets from those who feel forced to respond to his lies and distortions. Much like Satan whispering temptations into the ears of the unsuspecting Nutty is a provocateur, planting the seeds of discord and then stepping back to watch the chaos unfold. His baiting tactics are especially insidious. Nutty doesn't simply accuse others of wrongdoing. He goes out of his way to frame these accusations in such a way that the accused feels compelled to respond. It's a classic bait and switch where Nutty's lies are so outrageous that silence feels like an admission of guilt. By drawing others into this web of deceit, he tempts them into arguments that otherwise wouldn't exist. It's a strategy designed to exhaust and overwhelm, much like Satan's tactics of wearing people down by tempting them into sin over and over again. Nutty's ability to manipulate others into conflict mirrors Satan's skill at leading people into situations where they act out of anger, frustration, or pride. Once his target responds, Nutty ramps up his attacks, doubling down on his accusations and fanning the flames of the argument. He's a master at escalating situations, taking what could have been a small misunderstanding or slight and turning it into a full-blown confrontation. And once the target is fully engaged, Nutty sits back and watches as the conflict spirals out of control, knowing that he's succeeded in dragging someone else into the muck with him. What makes Nutty's actions even more infuriating is that he does all of this with a veneer of innocence, as if he's merely pointing out the truth or exposing wrongdoing. In reality, he's setting traps for others, tempting them into reactions that will only make the situation worse. By baiting others into defending themselves or retaliating, Nutty succeeds in drawing them into a cycle of conflict that mirrors Satan's endless attempts to lead people into sin. The more his targets fight back, the more entrenched they become in the drama Nutty has orchestrated. And that's exactly what Nutty wants. By dragging others into pointless arguments, he effectively distracts them from more important matters. His goal isn't to resolve issues or bring clarity to a situation. It's to create as much confusion and conflict as possible. In doing so, he keeps his targets preoccupied with defending themselves rather than moving forward with their lives. It's a tactic of delay and distraction, much like Satan's strategy of leading people away from their true purpose by tempting them into sin and strife. One of the most devious aspects of Nutty's behavior is the way he plays on human nature. He knows that most people have a strong sense of justice and fairness, and that they're likely to respond when they're falsely accused or misrepresented. Nutty exploits this by making his accusations just outrageous enough to provoke a response, knowing full well that his targets will feel compelled to defend themselves. Once they've taken the bait, Nutty has them right where he wants them, embroiled in a conflict that they never wanted but now can't seem to escape. Much like Satan, Nutty takes pleasure in watching people fall into the traps he's laid for them. He enjoys seeing others become frustrated, angry, and defensive, knowing that their reactions only serve to fuel his next round of attack. It's a cycle of temptation and conflict that Nutty has perfected, leaving a trail of frustrated and exhausted individuals in his wake. And just like Satan, Nutty never takes responsibility for the role he plays in these conflicts. Instead, he positions himself as the innocent party, the one merely exposing the truth, even as he continues to fan the flames of strife. Ultimately, Nutty's penchant for tempting others into conflict is a reflection of his own inner turmoil. Just as Satan tempts people into sin because of his own rebellion against God, Nutty lures others into conflict because of his own bitterness and dissatisfaction with his life. By dragging others down, Nutty temporarily elevates himself, feeding his fragile ego and giving himself a sense of control. But like all tempters, Nutty's victories are hollow. The conflicts he creates never bring him peace or satisfaction, only a brief distraction from his own failing. In the end, Nutty Disco Dave's attempts to tempt others into conflict will always fall short of achieving anything meaningful. His tactics may succeed in creating temporary strife, but the people he targets will eventually see through his games and refuse to be drawn in. And when that happens, Nutty will be left to stew in his own bitterness, still trying to tempt others into the same cycles of conflict that keep him trapped in his own personal hell. Like Satan, Nutty may enjoy playing the tempter, but his victory is short lived, and ultimately his actions will only serve to isolate him further from those around him. Chapter 6. Nutty Disco Dave, the obsessive fixation on others' sin. Nutty Disco Dave has developed an unhealthy obsession with cataloging the faults, flaws, and alleged misdeeds of others. Much like Satan, often referred to as the accuser, Nutty is fixated on pointing fingers at everyone around him, never sparing a moment to reflect on his own behavior. His entire existence seems to revolve around one central mission: finding dirt on others and broadcasting it to the world, no matter how irrelevant or exaggerated. This obsession with other people's perceived sins, rather than his own, reveals a hypocritical streak and a deeply judgmental nature, reminiscent of Satan's ceaseless accusations against humanity. Nutty's approach is simple: focus on the supposed wrongdoings of others, never on himself. He's like a man with a magnifying glass, spending his days meticulously combing through people's lives to uncover any fault, however minor. Whether it's a misspoken word, a past mistake, or a complete fabrication, Nutty seizes it and blows it out of proportion. He twists these flaws into a narrative that suits his agenda, painting others as irredeemable while ignoring the glaring contradictions in his own life. Much like Satan, who thrives on highlighting humanity's sins, Nutty's obsession with the faults of others allows him to avoid looking in the mirror. By constantly pointing out others' perceived sins, he creates a distraction from his own shortcomings. After all, if he can make others appear worse, perhaps he can convince himself and anyone who will listen that he's somehow in the right. It's a classic case of deflection, where Nutty's focus on the sins of others allows him to feel justified in his own bitterness, hatred, and dishonesty. His obsession takes many forms, but it often manifests in his relentless pursuit of evidence to condemn others. Nutty combs through old videos, social media posts, and any material he can get his hands on, desperately seeking something, anything that he can use against his targets. His eagerness to find fault in others borders on pathological, as if he believes that every sin he exposes somehow validates his own life choices. And yet, the more he digs into the lives of others, the more he exposes his own insecurities, bitterness, and desperation. There's a certain irony in Nutty's fixation on others' sins, considering his own behavior. He frequently engages in gossip, spreading lies and rumors, and stirring up conflict among those he targets. He shows no remorse for his actions, instead, doubling down on his efforts to expose others. It's a behavior that mirrors Satan's tactics, spreading strife, confusion, and hurt while avoiding any form of accountability. Like Satan, Nutty seems to believe that he holds some moral high ground, even as he acts in ways that are deeply harmful to others. What's particularly striking about Nutty's obsession is that it's often unfounded or blown out of proportion. He's not simply exposing wrongdoings. He's creating them, twisting situations to suit his narrative, and accusing people of things they may not have done. Nutty thrives on the drama of false accusations, much like Satan distorts the truth to lead people astray. By inflating minor faults or outright fabricating stories, Nutty keeps others on the defensive, forcing them to confront accusations that often bear little resemblance to reality. In some cases, Nutty's behavior even crosses into the absurd. His fixation on one individual, whom he labels the porn king, is a prime example of this obsessive focus on sin. Despite having no evidence to support his claims, Nutty continually returns to this baseless accusation as if it somehow validates his own twisted worldview. He twists the facts, exaggerates, and projects his own insecurities onto others, all while avoiding any examination of his own flaws. Like Satan, Nutty seems more concerned with condemning others than with living a life of integrity himself. What drives Nutty to this behavior is difficult to say, but it likely stems from a deep sense of dissatisfaction with his own life. By focusing on the sins of others, he avoids confronting the painful truth about his own shortcoming. His obsessive need to find fault in others reflects an inner emptiness, a need to feel superior or justified, even if it's based on lies. Nutty's actions mirror Satan's in this way. Both use the sins of others as a way to distract from their own fall from grace. Nutty Disco Dave's fixation on other people's sins is not only hypocritical, but also deeply damaging. His relentless accusations sow discord, hurt relationships, and create unnecessary strife. Like Satan, Nutty thrives on division, using his accusations to pit people against one another and keep them focused on their own guilt and shame. By constantly reminding others of their past mistakes, Nutty keeps them bound to those errors, much like Satan's ability to trap individuals in cycles of guilt and sin. Yet, while Nutty may enjoy his role as the accuser, he ultimately isolates himself. His obsession with others' sins leaves him unable to form genuine, trusting relationships, as he's always on the lookout for the next flaw to exploit. His actions may bring temporary satisfaction as he drags others down, but in the long run, Nutty is left alone, surrounded only by the echoes of his own accusations. His life, like Satan's, becomes defined by the destruction he causes in others' lives, and in the end, he finds no peace or resolution, only the bitter satisfaction of a life spent in judgment. In conclusion, Nutty Disco Dave's obsessive focus on the sins of others reveals a deep hypocrisy and judgmental spirit that mirrors Satan's own tactics. By constantly accusing, condemning, and magnifying the faults of others, Nutty distracts himself from the glaring flaws in his own character. His relentless pursuit of others' sins ultimately isolates him, leaving him trapped in a cycle of bitterness and blame, never able to find the peace that comes from self-reflection or growth. Like Satan, Nutty's life is defined by the destruction he causes, both in the lives of others and within his own heart. Chapter 7. Nutty Disco Dave. False morality and hypocrisy. Nutty Disco Dave, in his relentless campaign against others, often cloaks himself in the guise of moral superiority. He points fingers, hurls accusations, and positions himself as a crusader for what is right. But beneath the surface, his own actions are steeped in malicious intent and dishonesty. His hypocrisy is glaring, claiming to stand on the moral high ground while engaging in behavior that contradicts the very principles he claims to defend. This kind of false morality is reminiscent of Satan's tactics, where a facade of righteousness is used to deceive and destroy. Nutty presents himself as the arbiter of justice, especially when it comes to targeting individuals he despises. He parades around as if he is some kind of moral authority, constantly berating others for their supposed sin. One of his favorite labels to throw around is the porn king, an accusation as baseless as it is slanderous. With this, he tries to convince those around him that he is the only one with the moral clarity to see the truth about others. Yeah, it's clear to anyone with a discerning eye that Nutty is far from the paragon of virtue he pretends to be. Behind this facade of righteousness, Nutty's behavior is riddled with dishonesty and maliciousness. He twists facts to suit his agenda, creates false narratives to harm those he dislikes, and engages in a campaign of deceit that's hardly justifiable by any moral standard. In essence, he does the very things he accuses others of doing, yet somehow believes himself to be exempt from judgment. It's as if Nutty's self righteousness acts as a shield against his own conscience, allowing him to continue his deceitful ways without feeling the weight of his own hypocrisy. Much like Satan, who is described as the father of all lies in the Bible, Nutty Disco Dave thrives on falsehoods. He fabricates stories, distorts the truth, and revels in the chaos that these lies create. Yet, in his twisted worldview, this is all somehow justified because, in his mind, he's on the side of righteousness. His attacks on others aren't motivated by a desire for justice or truth, but by a need to elevate himself by dragging others down. It's a classic example of false morality, where the outward appearance of virtue masks a heart full of deceit and malice. Perhaps the most hypocritical aspect of Nutty's behavior is his complete disregard for the truth. While he accuses others of all manner of wrongdoing, he is constantly engaged in actions that are far worse. He will gossip, lie, and slander without batting an eye, all while positioning himself as the morally superior party. The disconnect between what he says and what he does is staggering. But in Nutty's world, this double standard is perfectly acceptable. He's quick to accuse others of sins, but utterly blind to his own, much like Satan, who leads others astray while pretending to stand for righteousness. Nutty's false morality also serves as a convenient cover for his true intentions. By positioning himself as a moral crusader, he distracts from his own shortcomings and shifts the focus to the faults of others. It's a tactic straight out of Satan's playbook: accuse, deflect, and deceive, all while pretending to be on the side of good. Nutty's goal isn't to bring about any real sense of justice or truth. It's simply to create as much damage as possible while maintaining the illusion of moral authority. His behavior is nothing more than a self serving attempt to justify his malicious actions. The hypocrisy at the heart of Nutty's false morality is even more evident when considering the people he targets. He often goes after those who have done little to deserve his wrath, fabricating elaborate stories about their supposed wrongdoing. Meanwhile, his own life is filled with examples of dishonesty, manipulation, and cruelty, things he conveniently overlooks when casting judgment on others. It's as though Nutty believes that his own sins don't count as long as he's pointing out the sins of others. In this way, he mirrors Satan's tactic of keeping people focused on the wrongdoings of others while ignoring their own faults. Nutty's hypocrisy becomes even more glaring when viewed in the context of his interactions with others. He demands respect and civility from those around him, yet offers none in return. He expects to be treated with deference, while he freely engages in character assassination and baseless accusations. This double standard is a hallmark of his false morality. He believes the rules don't apply to him, only to others. It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, where Nutty holds others to a moral standard that he himself has no intention of following. At the core of Nutty's false morality is an inability to reflect on his own actions. Like Satan, who refuses to acknowledge his own role in bringing about chaos and destruction, Nutty remains willfully blind to the harm he causes. He is so consumed by his need to bring others down that he never stops to consider the damage he's doing to others and to himself. His hypocrisy, while obvious to those on the outside, is invisible to him, as he's too busy reveling in the chaos he creates to recognize his own culpability. In conclusion, Nutty Disco Dave's false morality and hypocrisy are central to his behavior. He pretends to be a defender of righteousness while engaging in deceit and maliciousness that contradict his supposed moral stand. His actions, much like those of Satan, are rooted in dishonesty and a desire to sow discord, all while maintaining the illusion of being on the side of good. Nutty's hypocrisy is a testament to his inability to face his own flaws, and his false morality serves as little more than a mask for the destructive force he truly is. Chapter 8: Nutty Disco Dave, Perpetuating Lies and Misinformation. Nutty Disco Dave has mastered the art of perpetuating lies and misinformation, making it a hallmark of his relentless campaigns against others. Whether it's fabricating stories about porn sites or making baseless accusations that serve no purpose other than to tarnish someone's reputation, Nutty thrives on falsehoods. His behavior mirrors that of Satan, who is famously known as the father of all lies. Like Satan, Nutty's goal is not to seek out the truth, but to manipulate facts and distort reality to fit his twisted agenda. One of Nutty's favorite weapons is the outright lie, particularly his obsession with labeling someone as the porn king. This accusation is not only entirely unfounded, but serves as a blatant attempt to defame and slander. The fact that Nutty continues to harp on this falsehood, despite it having been debunked numerous times, shows his utter disregard for the truth. In his world, it doesn't matter if something is true or not. What matters is whether or not it can be used to harm his target. This fixation on perpetuating lies to achieve his own ends is a reflection of Nutty's deep-seated maliciousness, and much like Satan, he uses these lies to stir up chaos and conflict. Misinformation is Nutty's bread and butter, and he spreads it liberally. Whether through his social media posts, his videos, or the rumors he circulates, Nutty has a knack for twisting the truth just enough to make it sound plausible, even when it's completely false. He relies on half-truths and distortions, making wild claims that have no basis in reality, hoping that his audience will be too distracted by the spectacle to question his narrative. This tactic is reminiscent of Satan's ability to deceive, mixing just enough truth with lies to make the deception believable. What makes Nutty's actions even more insidious is that he often disguises his lies as some sort of public service. He frames his false accusations as if he's doing the world a favor by exposing others, all the while perpetuating misinformation that only serves to harm. This sense of false righteousness, combined with his willingness to spread lies without hesitation, creates a toxic combination. Nutty genuinely seems to believe that by spreading falsehoods, he's somehow fulfilling a noble cause, when in reality, he's only spreading discord and confusion. Nutty's obsession with misinformation doesn't just stop at individual accusations. He often dredges up old rumors, resurrecting past disputes that have long been settled, and presents them as if they are fresh scandals. This tactic not only spreads lies, but also keeps old wound open, preventing any healing or reconciliation from taking place. By bringing up past conflicts and dressing them in the guise of new information. Nutty ensures that the cycle of strife and discord continues, all while fueling his own vendettas. In addition to perpetuating lies about others, Nutty is a master at misrepresenting himself. He portrays himself as a truth seeker, a crusader for justice, and a moral authority, all while engaging in the very behaviors he accuses others of. This blatant hypocrisy only adds to the layers of deception he spins, as his audience is led to believe that he is someone trustworthy and credible, when the reality couldn't be further from the truth. Like Satan, Nutty's greatest strength lies in his ability to present himself as something he is not, manipulating others into believing in the facade he has created. Nutty's tendency to spread misinformation is particularly damaging because he often targets those who are vulnerable or those who have already been hurt by his lies, rather than seeking the truth or engaging in any kind of constructive dialogue. He continues to throw out baseless accusations and false claims, knowing full well the damage they can cause. This behavior is akin to Satan's destructive nature, seeking to ruin lives through deceit and falsehoods without any regard for the consequences. One of the most telling aspects of Nutty's misinformation campaigns is how quickly he moves on from one lie to the next, once a false claim has been exposed or debunked. Nutty doesn't stop to acknowledge his mistake or correct the record. Instead, he simply moves on to the next accusation, continuing his cycle of lies without ever facing accountability. This refusal to confront the truth is a key part of Nutty's strategy. By constantly creating new falsehoods, he keeps his audience distracted and prevents them from realizing the full extent of his deceit. Nutty's love for misinformation goes beyond simple slander. He enjoys the chaos and confusion that his lies create, much like Satan, who takes pleasure in sowing discord. The more people are confused, the more they fight amongst themselves, and the more power Nutty gains in controlling the narrative. His lies are not just weapons against his enemies, they are tools for manipulation designed to keep people off balance and unable to see the truth. Ultimately, Nutty Disco Dave's perpetuation of lies and misinformation is not just a character flaw. It's a deliberate tactic he uses to maintain control and power over those around him by distorting the truth and creating a web of falsehoods. Nutty keeps his audience in a state of confusion and strife, preventing any real understanding or resolution from taking place. His behavior is a clear reflection of Satan's role as the father of lies, using deception to achieve his goals without regard for the damage he causes. In conclusion, Nutty Disco Dave's constant spreading of lies and misinformation is a key element of his toxic behavior. His willingness to fabricate stories, distort the truth, and mislead others mirrors the tactics of Satan, whose ultimate goal is to deceive and destroy. Nutty's lies may serve his short-term agenda, but in the long run, they only highlight his hypocrisy and his inability to face the truth. By perpetuating falsehoods, Nutty not only harms others, but also reveals his own moral bankruptcy, making him a master of deception in the worst possible way. Chapter 9, Nutty Disco Dave, Destruction of Relationships. Nutty Disco Dave has a notorious reputation for actively working to destroy relationships, a behavior that echoes the divisive tactics employed by Satan. Like a twisted puppeteer, Nutty manipulates the strings of perception, twisting the truth and fanning the flames of hatred to dismantle the bonds that connect people. His efforts to sow discord among friends, acquaintances, and even family members reflect a deep-seated desire to isolate others and thrive in the chaos that ensues. At the heart of Nutty's destructive behavior is his relentless pursuit of dirt on others. He has an insatiable need to uncover and publicize every fault, mistake, or personal failing of those around him. Whether it's resurrecting old grievances or spreading unfounded rumors, Nutty takes a malicious joy in exposing the vulnerabilities of others. His goal is simple: to turn friends against each other, eroding trust and camaraderie in the process. This mirrors Satan's strategy of creating division. By highlighting weaknesses and igniting insecurities, Nutty ensures that relationships crumble under the weight of suspicion and animosity. One of the most insidious aspects of Nutty's approach is his talent for manipulating perceptions. He doesn't just present information, he packages it with a slant that encourages hostility. He crafts narratives that paint individuals in a negative light, often omitting crucial context or distorting the truth to fit his agenda. By doing so, he creates an atmosphere of distrust, where individuals begin to question the loyalty and intentions of those they once considered friends. This calculated manipulation fosters an environment ripe for misunderstandings, making it easier for relationships to fracture. Nutty often utilizes the strategy of divide and conquer. He plays on the insecurities and vulnerabilities of his targets, knowing that people are more likely to listen to gossip and unfounded accusations when they feel threatened or insecure. By whispering lies and half truths into the ears of friends, he is able to pit them against one another, turning allies into adversaries. This behavior is reminiscent of Satan's work. He thrives on creating doubt and fear among people, ensuring that bonds are strained or outright severed. His actions not only seek to destroy relationships, but also contribute to a broader culture of animosity. By encouraging hatred and resentment, Nutty cultivates an environment where friendships are treated as disposable, easily discarded in favor of petty squabbles and false accusation. This creates a toxic cycle where mistrust breeds further hostility and genuine connections become increasingly rare. Just as Satan delights in the strife and suffering of humanity, Nutty takes pleasure in witnessing the fallout from his actions, reveling in the chaos he has orchestrated. One of the more troubling aspects of Nutty's approach is that he often masks his destructive behavior behind a facade of concern. He may present himself as someone who is merely looking out for the interests of his friends, claiming to expose the truth for their benefit. This duplicitous nature allows him to evade accountability for his actions, as he positions himself as a misguided hero rather than the villain he truly is. This manipulation is akin to Satan masquerading as an angel of light, deceiving individuals into believing that his intentions are pure while secretly working to bring about their downfall. Moreover, Nutty's obsession with destruction extends to both personal and online relationships. He has been known to target friendships within digital spaces where anonymity allows him to spread rumors and create division with impunity. This is particularly harmful in a world where online connections are often the lifeline for many. By fracturing these relationships, Nutty not only harms individuals, but also disrupts communities, creating rifts that can be difficult to heal. Just as Satan thrives on chaos and confusion, Nutty sees the fragmentation of relationships as a victory, an opportunity to further his agenda of division. As he actively works to destroy relationships, Nutty often overlooks the long term consequences of his actions. The fallout from his manipulations can lead to lasting scars, affecting individuals and communities alike. Friendships that were once strong may never fully recover, and the damage done can echo through social circles for years to come. This disregard for the emotional well being of others speaks to Nutty's character. He is willing to sacrifice the happiness of many for his own amusement or sense of superiority. Ultimately, Nutty Disco Dave's penchant for destruction of relationships reveals a deep seated need for control and power. By tearing apart the bonds that hold people together, he positions himself as a figure of authority, one who has the ability to influence and manipulate those around him. His destructive behavior is a reflection of a broader strategy rooted in division, akin to Satan's quest to create chaos among humanity. In conclusion, Nutty Disco Dave's active role in the destruction of relationships serves as a stark reminder of the power of manipulation and deceit. By digging up dirt, spreading misinformation, and encouraging hatred, he embodies the divisive nature of Satan. His actions lead to broken bonds and shattered trust. leaving a wake of chaos that only he seems to thrive in. As he continues his quest for destruction, it becomes increasingly clear that Nutty is not just a disruptor. He is a master of manipulation, dedicated to tearing apart the very fabric of human connection. Chapter 10. Nutty Disco Dave, feeding on envy and bitterness. Nutty Disco Dave's behavior is a tapestry woven from threads of envy and bitterness, mirroring the destructive tendencies often attributed to Satan. Like a stormy cloud that hovers over a sunlit day, Nutty's discontent and resentment cloud his interactions with others, driving him to lash out at those he perceives as more successful, intelligent, or admirable. His actions are not merely the result of a sour disposition. They are fueled by a deep-seated desire to see others fail, a tendency that aligns him with the darker aspects of human nature. At the core of Nutty's bitterness lies an unhealthy fixation on those who have achieved what he has not. This envy manifests itself in various ways, from subtle digs to outright accusation. He revels in pointing out the flaws of others, using their successes as a backdrop against which his own inadequacies are starkly illuminated. This constant comparison breeds a toxic mentality that prevents him from celebrating the achievements of others. Instead of fostering camaraderie, Nutty's envy compels him to sabotage relationships, actively seeking to undermine the very individuals whose successes irritate him. Nutty's envy acts as a catalyst for his behavior, driving him to engage in petty gossip and slander. He takes pleasure in spreading rumors and distorting truths, all in an attempt to bring down those he envies. This mirrors Satan's role as the tempter who seeks to sow discord and discontent among humanity. Just as Satan's envy led to his fall from grace, Nutty's bitterness propels him toward actions that not only harm others, but also chip away at his own humanity. His relentless need to belittle and attack serves as a reminder of how envy can distort one's character, transforming a once ordinary individual into a vessel of spite. The vengeful spirit within Nutty is a direct reflection of his own insecurities and failures. He seeks to assert power over those he perceives as more successful, believing that by tearing them down, he can elevate his own standing, however temporarily. This behavior resembles Satan's desire to drag others into the depths of despair, seeking to make them question their worth and value. Nutty thrives on creating conflict, his bitterness acting as a dark fuel that ignites tensions and hostilities among friends and acquaintances. Moreover, Nutty's actions reveal a profound lack of self-awareness. His obsessive focus on the perceived shortcomings of others blinds him to his own flaws and failings. In a world that thrives on authenticity and connection, he opts for a path of bitterness and resentment, viewing every success of others as a personal affront. This destructive mindset reinforces the cycle of envy. Rather than seeking self-improvement or collaboration, Nutty opts for hostility, ensuring that he remains trapped in a world of negativity. As his envy festers, Nutty becomes a caricature of resentment. He fails to recognize that true success lies not in tearing others down, but in lifting oneself up. Instead of celebrating the achievements of those around him, he becomes consumed by the idea that their success diminishes his own. This perspective is a dangerous one, as it isolates him further and reinforces his belief that he must compete at all costs, often leading to destructive actions that alienate him from potential allies. In addition, Nutty's envy can lead to a profound sense of isolation. His relentless pursuit of vengeance often results in the very outcome he fears: alienation from others. Friends become enemies, and every attempt at connection is marred by his bitter outlook. He stands alone amidst the ruins of his relationships, blinded by the very envy that once drove him to seek revenge. This isolation is reminiscent of Satan's ultimate downfall, cast away and alone, fueled by the envy that consumed him. Ultimately, Nutty Disco Dave's behavior serves as a cautionary tale about the corrosive effects of envy and bitterness. His actions are not merely the result of personal grievances. They are a reflection of a soul consumed by darkness, much like Satan's own descent into malice. As he continues to feed on these negative emotions, Nutty transforms into a figure of spite, disconnected from the joys of genuine connection and camaraderie. His legacy becomes one of destruction rather than celebration, leaving behind a trail of bitterness that speaks volumes about the toll envy can take on the human spirit. In conclusion, Nutty's destructive tendencies, fueled by envy and bitterness, resonate deeply with the darker aspects of human nature. His desire to see others fail, coupled with his obsession with their perceived shortcomings, positions him as a modern day reflection of Satan's envy. As he navigates a world filled with resentment and hostility, Nutty becomes a reminder of how unchecked envy can lead to a life devoid of joy, connection, and genuine fulfillment. Instead of embracing the beauty of collaboration and shared success, Nutty remains ensnared in a web of bitterness, forever feeding on the very emotions that threaten to consume him. Thank you for taking the time to hear why Nutty resembles his daddy, Satan. I could go on for another hour, but I trust most of you have grasped my point, perhaps with the exception of Nutty Disco Dave himself. How can someone so self righteous and arrogant ever feel true remorse, let alone consider repentance? It's worth noting that I never initiated anything with him. I merely responded. Nutty should acknowledge that he's the one who provoked this in the first place. If he wishes for this to end, the solution is simple. He must stop. However, knowing his nature, it seems unlikely he'll ever realize that fact. So I'm quite prepared for whatever nonsense he throws my way, but he'll need to muster the courage to handle my responses. This time, I won't be misled by his false attempts at P. He's tried that before, and it was nothing more than a ploy to launch further attacks. It only shows what a vengeful character he is, much like his daddy, Satan. So, to everyone listening, I say this: let the festivities for part two begin.